Are you a fan of the Mandela Effect? Have you ever even heard of the Mandela Effect? Or have you forgotten that you heard about the Mandela Effect? So, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm sure a lot of you do, this is a phenomenon that started a couple of years ago. It was a paranormal researcher, Fiona Broom, had stated that she had vivid memories of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the late 80s, and that this must be some sort of glitch in the matrix, right? That it couldn't just be that she had a bad memory. And keep in mind, she's a paranormal researcher. So, you know, uh, so at that point, how trustworthy can she be? But she'd had this vivid memory and just claimed that something was going on. That she remembered Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s, when Nelson Mandela died in 2013, so not that long ago. In fact, he lived a long, healthy life. He was in prison, in the 80s. This was the South African apartheid. But I'm going to explain to you what I think is going on here, and why she misremembers things, and why a lot of us probably misremember things. So again, this was a paranormal researcher, Fiona Broom, and she says that she had vivid and detailed memories of news coverage of Mandela dying in prison in the 80s. Well, to go along with this, people started saying that, yeah, this just proves that we're living in a simulation. That all of our whole life and our existence is a simulation. And when we see these things, that there are glitches in the system, right? There's glitches in the matrix. Remember in the Matrix movie, whenever Neo was walking, when they're going through the building and he sees the black cat walk across twice across the doorway. And he says, deja vu. And they're like, what? And he says, well, I just saw that same black cat go by twice. And they're like, that's how they knew that somebody was rewriting the code or something like that in the Matrix. So this is all fun, right? This is kind of fun. These are little like fish tales or fables, urban legends. Or is it, is it more that we're just misremembering things because our memories aren't that great? How many, police stories do you watch or movies where the police ask, what did the guy look like? And they ask like 5 different people. And, one lady says, oh, he was 6 foot tall. He was wide shoulders. Then they ask another person, well, what did the guy look like to you? And they're like, well, he was short and he was fat and he was bald. It's because that's our memories. We're just not good with remembering things. And there are different parts of our memory, and I'm not gonna get into all that stuff, right? This is trying to simplify this for you to help you understand what's going on here. Because like we have muscle memory, right? That's the things that tell us like how to tie our shoes, how to ride a bike, how to drive a car, the everyday mundane things. Those are, part of your muscle memory. But then like the stories of your life, you misremember things. You either add details or you remove details from events or things that happened. You could say, oh, on the day that I was, having dinner with a friend, I remember I was wearing a blue shirt, and maybe you were wearing a white shirt. You just misremembered, right? Because maybe more often than not, you wear blue shirts. So people are trying to say that this is a thing that is proof that there's something wrong with the Matrix. And one of the most prominent things that people bring up is the Berenstain Bears. Now, as a kid of the 70s and 80s, we had these books in our house. Almost every kid, and maybe today, they're still available. I don't know. But this is what kids in the 70s and 80s were raised on. And people can't remember if it was the Berenstain or Berenstein Bears. Well, it's the Berenstain Bears, Stain. But Stein is a more traditional name, right? So our brain just takes Stein, and places that in there. Another one is the Monopoly Man. So many people remember the Monopoly Man wearing a monocle. Okay. So is it that he had a monocle or he didn't have a monocle? Well, he never had a monocle. But why are we misremembering these things? Why in our head do we have that he has a monocle? Well, could it be that the Planters Peanut guy, it was a famous character about the same time, as Monopoly was really becoming a household game in the 80s, in the late 70s and 80s, that the Planters Peanut character, you can look this up, you can find images of the Planters Peanut guy. He wears a monocle, also has a top hat, just like the Monopoly guy. So our brain is taking things and it's adding it to other things. People swear to God that there was a Jiffy Peanut Butter. Well, there's never been a Jiffy Peanut Butter. It's always been Jif, J-I-F, not J-I-F-F-Y, not J-I-F-F. It's just been Jif, J-I-F. It's always been Jif. But for some reason, people get Jiffy in their head, and they're like, no, I swear there was a Jiffy Peanut Butter. Well, or is it that about the same time, again, this is one of these things where it's at the same time, there was Skippy Peanut Butter, had a Y on the end. In your pantry next to the peanut butter, probably in most households, you had Jiffy popcorn. That was a big thing in the 70s and 80s. Before we had microwave popcorn, it came like in a little metal tray, and you cooked it on the oven top. So Jiffy Lube, oil changes, Jiffy cornbread mix, right? So these are, Jiffy cornbread mix, Jiffy popcorn. These are all things you would have had, in your pantry. So your mind maybe has just taken that Jiffy and attached that to Jif peanut butter. Fruit of the Loom underwear logo. So many people remember there being a cornucopia, and there's never been a cornucopia in the logo. So the one on the right is the correct one. So why do so many people have this image in their head of there being a cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo? I mean, do you remember that? How many of these things do you remember? How many of these things are you like, oh, this is nonsense, right? When I started hearing about this years ago in like the mid 2000s, it was just like, oh, this is another one of these paranormal things like Chupacabra or Bigfoot or aliens or ancient aliens or engineers. When the Matrix movie came out in the early 2000s, people started becoming all of a sudden fans of Philip K. Dick and all of his books, about the future and what's going on. And are we living in this dystopian, cyberpunk reality? And it's just, or is it just bad memories? There's no glitch in the Matrix. We're not living in a simulation. If we lived in a simulation, we wouldn't have things like pain, right? You wouldn't die. Things wouldn't hurt. I look at a lot of this stuff and it's fun, right? It's fun, but it's nonsensical. And there are people literally making a living out of talking about this stuff. I mean, there are hundreds of videos here on YouTube talking about this. There are probably hundreds of podcasts, where they discuss this, what I call nonsense. And I think I can explain, so the whole basis of this is that, that Nelson Mandela supposedly died in the mid 80s. And I think I can clear this up. I could have cleared this up for this lady many, many years ago, this Fiona Broom. So in the 80s, 70s, 80s, Mandela was in prison in South Africa. Somebody else was also in prison too. Stephen Biko. Stephen Biko died in 1977. And in fact, in 1980, Peter Gabriel wrote a song about it called Biko. It was a beautiful song. And it really kind of just details his life and how important he was to the anti-apartheid movement. Stephen Biko died in 1977. He was beat up by police. And so he didn't really die in prison. He was left outside of a hospital. But in the 1980s, in fact, in 1987, there was a movie called Cry Freedom. And it starred Denzel Washington and Kevin Kline. This was a very emotional movie about the story and life of Stephen Biko and his death. And so at the time of the release of this movie, there was all kinds of interviews that, this was on the Today Show. It was everywhere, right? Entertainment Tonight. Everybody was talking about this movie. So was this Fiona Broom conflating those two things in her head? Stephen Biko, Nelson Mandela. right? Because she says that she remembers vividly news stories about Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, and that the news had said this. It's like, or is it more likely that the news was covering this movie, with Denzel Washington? And it was a Richard Attenborough movie. So this was a really well, done documentary movie. So I think if you can explain things, it kind of clears it all up, and we can like bust this myth or debunk this, So again, bust it. So I think there is no such thing as the Mandela effect. I think people just have bad memories. People have bad memories about their own life. How many people don't remember their spouse's, birthday or their wedding anniversary? You get in trouble for that kind of stuff. But all these other things become nonsensical. There's one about whether or not the Flintstones is spelled with two T's or one T. It was always spelled with two T's. Did Curious George have a tail? And no, in the book he didn't have a tail, right? I mean, are there any of these things that you know of that you believe in? People always throw to the movies that in Star Wars, Darth Vader says, "No, Luke, no, I'm your father." I was about to mess it up myself. But everybody remembers him saying, "Luke, I am your father." Right? But then in a famous interview, well, famous, but in an interview on television, he talks about this. The actor playing that role talks about saying that he remembers when he got the script and what a big plot twist it was when he said that he saw on there, it says, "Luke, I'm your father." And again, so he's just misremembering what the script said, or is he saying it in third person, right? Because it's an interview. So is he conflating that and trying to say that, well, the character is Luke, right? Because this is when the movie had just come out. So if he would have just said, "No, I'm your father," which is what he says in the movie and it's in the script, is he telling the person who's interviewing him that the other character that he's talking to is Luke? Right? Because even as kids, we used to do this. Whenever we'd role play that movie, we'd say, "Luke, I'm your father," because we're wanting our friends to understand who we're talking about. Because if somebody just came up to you and said, "No, I'm your father," you'd be like, "What are you talking about?" "Oh, but Luke, Star Wars." Right? Another one is from Forest Gump, where Forrest is on the bench and he says, "Well, like my mama always said, life is like a box of chocolates." Or he says, "Was." Right? And that's the big problem that people have. They're like, "Well, he says life was like a box of chocolates." Or we quote it that it's life is like a box of chocolates when he actually said life was like a box of chocolates. See, like this all just becomes so confusing. So it's hard to remember what's right and what's wrong. So everybody remembers Forrest in their head saying life is like a box of chocolates. Well, when you watch the movie, he says life was like a box of chocolates. Because to add context to it, and nobody ever does this when they do these videos or these podcasts or these books where they talk about this nonsense. They forget to add that Forrest says, "Well, like my mama always used to say." So now he's referring to her in the past tense because she's passed away. So he says life was like a box of chocolates. But there's a glitch in the matrix, right? There's a glitch in the system. Earlier in the film, right? Because this is all kind of like memories. Because like the whole movie kind of takes place on this park bench, and he's sitting next to random people recounting his life, and that's kind of the movie, right? If you've never seen Forrest Gump, but there is one scene where he's recalling when his mom is telling him that she's dying, that she's got cancer, and she's laying in bed on her deathbed, and she does say, "Forrest, you've got to make of your life, you got to make your own way in life." And she says, "Just remember, life is like a box of chocolates." So it is said in that movie, but by Forrest's mom. And that was a pretty big emotional scene, right? Because she's laying in her deathbed. And Forrest, what am I going to do without my mom, right? That's been the only person that's been there for him, for forever. So again, like, these things that we misremember, where else do we do this? Because these are minor little things. right? Like, how big is Jif peanut butter in your life? Are you eating it every day? Is that all you eat? Because at that point, yeah, you probably would not, you would remember that. But if these little things that are just kind of come and go in our lives, the Berenstain Bears, Fruit of the Loom, what does it even matter? Because if you think about that cornucopia, is it more of that all your life around fall time? You see a lot of photos of the fall harvest, and always there's a cornucopia in the photo, literally always. And so when you look up images of cornucopia, you will find that little woven basket that's shaped like a cone, and there's like squash and uh, things like that, little pumpkins and things like that. So that gotten imprinted on your brain, and then when you see a thing of fruit, your brain just automatically puts something else in the image. So I think I can explain, like, that's what's going on here, because like I said, with how big that movie was, Cry Freedom, in 1987, is that what this lady is misremembering? Because Stephen Biko was a South African anti-apartheid activist. Nelson Mandela was also a South African anti-apartheid activist. They were both in prison. One died, one didn't. So Nelson went on to have, like I said, a wonderful, fruitful life and didn't die until 2013. Are you one of those people that when that happened, you thought, oh, I thought he died a long time ago? I mean, we do that today with actors or musicians. Oh, I thought they died years ago, right? Like if you had heard in the next couple of years that Keith Richards died, you might think, oh, I thought he died a long time ago, right? But Keith Richards is going to live to be a million, apparently. I don't know. What is there any Mandela effect that you think that proves that there's some glitch in the system? Or you like me, we're like, this is kind of nonsense. It's fun, right? It's fun, to have these kind of this folklore, these fairy tales, these urban legends. And do you realize that that's all they are? This is just for entertainment purposes? Or are you like this very small section of the population that honestly believes this stuff, that honestly waste their time, waste their energy and resources in trying to figure all this nonsense out, trying to prove that we're living in a simulation? Leave me a comment down below. Is there any other, because I know there's hundreds of these now. They pop up all the time. Every month there's a new video. Ooh, there's a new explanation. C3PO had a silver leg, not a gold leg in the original Star Wars. I mean, just something all the time. Is there something that I'm missing? Do you have a better explanation? Leave me a comment down below. All right. Hope you have a wonderful Labor Day, and I will talk to you next time on the John Malone Show.